Our scripture reading this morning comes from the Gospel according to Matthew. It's chapter 16, verses 13 to 23, and it's on page 850 in your pew Bible if you'd like to follow along. Please listen now to the word of the Lord. Now, when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do men say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the powers of death shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then he strictly charged the disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, "God forbid, Lord, this shall never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not on the side of God, but of men." The word of the Lord.
Thank you.
So they're in Caesarea Philippi, which is actually on the coast, and where wealthy have vacation homes. So I imagine them sitting under umbrellas, perhaps sipping lemonade, right? Enjoying the sun and the surf and the sand. And Jesus asks, "Who do others say that I am?" Come on. Can't we just skip one day of talking about this stuff? I mean, Jesus, we're on the sand and the surf and come on. But Jesus is waiting for an answer. So they roll their eyes and they say, "Fine. Some say you're Elijah and some say John the Baptist." But Jesus probes and he says, "But who do you say that I am?" And we get Peter's answer. He says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Yes, Peter," whose name means rock. "Yes, Peter, on this rock I will build my gathering, my church. I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." What were those keys to the kingdom of heaven that Jesus was going to give to Peter? Was it a key that opens a lock? Or a key like a guide on a map or a chart or a graph, right? Or maybe it was like a Florida key. A small, low elevation sandy island formed on top of a coral reef. Probably not what Jesus was mentioning, but Peter was a very good friend, and maybe that's an appropriate gift. What were the keys that Jesus was going to give Peter? Was Jesus referring to a musical key, maybe? This is what the kingdom of heaven sounds like when it's in tune. Or maybe the key in basketball, right? The restricted area around the net. What were the keys to the kingdom? What are the keys to the kingdom of heaven? And then the text turns on us. It says that from this moment on, Jesus began to talk about suffering and death and resurrection. From this moment on, huh? Everywhere they went. So it's like a new stump speech, if you will, right? From here on, this is what Jesus is talking about. Why does Jesus keep talking about suffering at the hands of the religious leaders? Or why keep saying that he has to die? Is he always ending his stump speech with moments about resurrection? Because I can understand why Peter might take him aside and say, Lord, if I may be so bold, maybe a little less on the suffering and death. It doesn't really help our cause to say that our leader is bound to die. And Jesus turns on him and says, Satan, get away from me. No, Peter, in this you are a stumbling block to me. Satan? You're going to call, did you just call me Satan? Right? You have to know that the conversation had to have gone that way. You've got to be kidding me. I am your closest friend, and you're going to call me Satan? No, Peter. In this, you're a stumbling block. You're missing the point. Well, enlighten me, right? Perhaps Peter has a little bit too much of my attitude, but... Enlighten me then. What's the point? Because you seem to think that the point is suffering and death, and I think the point is to spread our agenda. It does not engender confidence in your growing number of followers when you insist on saying that you have got to suffer and die. And so I imagine Jesus looking at Peter straight in the face and saying, and be raised. You're forgetting that key point. Imagine that then we are the crowd, instead of that distant crowd 2,000 years ago on some hill. Pretend Jesus is here, and he's giving his stump speech to us. And he begins to walk around the room. And he says, I see that many of you know suffering. Myasthenia gravis. My dad is in the hospital. My friend is really ill. They don't know what's wrong with my mom. My mom died. Right? We do this every Sunday. We talk about the things that concern us. We do it during our prayer time. We're pretty honest. I have cancer. Health company won't pay for my medication. Jesus walks around the room and says, I see that you know suffering. I miss my family. I have Parkinson's. My family is broken. I see that you know suffering, he says. I'm going to know suffering too, he says. At the hands of the religious leaders and the Roman officials, I'm going to suffer, he says. Suffering is part of the human condition. We're fragile. We break. I wonder if Jesus would draw from other religious traditions in the world. Buddhists, for example, often quote their own tradition by saying that life is suffering. And what they mean by that is that life contains hardship that we don't want, or that we don't know what to do about. And when we cling to what we want or what we had hoped for, then we deny what is happening actually in front of us, and it causes suffering. I wonder if Jesus would go as far as to say that if it wasn't for unrest or disease, dis-ease in our life, if it wasn't for suffering, we would never change or grow. If it wasn't for nudges or things that outright bowl us over, we never might find maturity, let alone compassion. Suffering opens us up. It makes us feel vulnerable, too. It makes us feel exposed and scared and angry and sad. Suffering jars us, though. It shakes us. It opens something up inside of us, like someone turned a key. Our first instinct to suffering is to fight it, right? Put stuff out the door. Don't let the door open. Bar it. Keep it closed. Hold on to what we know or expected or wanted or dreamed. I'm going to hold on to that. But fighting against suffering actually causes more suffering. But there is an act, a counterintuitive act, that releases the chains of suffering. It is the act of letting go. Letting go of what we thought, or wanted, or experienced. It may even feel like giving into death. And in this mini death, however, we are opened to a new possibility. Does this make sense? I can speak from my own journey with multiple sclerosis. For the first 3 years, I fought it. I would look back and say that was denial, possibly. But I've grown to think it is one of the strongest forces in the universe. I had an unintentional mantra that was inside of me that would come out when I didn't even know I was thinking about it. It's a little embarrassing to admit, but sometimes I would be driving in the car and I would say out loud, I don't want to. And then I would say, what? You don't want to what? Like, what were you? I didn't know I was thinking about it, right? I was just fighting it. Deep inside of me, I was fighting suffering, not giving into it. By the way, Pete's fine today. He's just sleeping in. We have tickets later, blah, blah, blah. Blah, blah, blah. He's going to watch it later. Deep inside, I was fighting suffering. I wasn't giving into it. And I thought I was not letting it change me, is what I thought I was doing, or get to me. I was clinging to life that I thought I was going to have, and I was causing more suffering. But when I accepted that this is really happening to us, when I let go of what wasn't happening anymore, when I stopped clinging to life without MS, I was actually set free to live again. And it was like someone turned a key. That key has been turned many, many times since then, right? Like, this isn't like a one-time shot, nor do I think salvation happens one time, right? It's like a continually working out our salvation. But that turn of that key, it sounds like resurrection to me. And I imagine that Jesus' stump speech always ramped up. Death is not the end. New life is where we're headed. New life in eternity, yes, but I'm talking about life. New life in the very next moment. New life in the now. This is what Jesus is talking about. We can begin anew. We can be born anew. Today, in this very moment, a new day is born. A new door is open to us, like someone turning a key. And Jesus assures them that he too will suffer. He will let go and die. And then he will be raised to new life. Resurrection unlocks death, and death unlocks suffering, and suffering unlocks us. Jesus said that he would give Peter the keys to the kingdom of heaven. And then he began continually talking about suffering, death, and resurrection. Is it possible that those are the keys to the kingdom of heaven? Resurrection unlocks death, death unlocks suffering, and suffering unlocks us. So one more question. Is it possible that the kingdom of heaven is within us? You have a Lego again this week. And so my question for you, if I dare, ask what needs to be unlocked in you. And before you look too hard, it probably has to do with something that is suffering in your life. because that suffering is trying to unlock you. What needs to be unlocked? And we will continue to build our mosaic of the kingdom of heaven here. And I'll invite Peter and Aaron to come play for us while we do that. What needs to be unlocked?